he was like, "How long have you been here today?" Because it was really late, and I was like, "Oh, I've been practicing for 10 hours." And he was like, "Have you been practicing or have you been playing?"
Love music more. Love music more. Ooh, love music more.
What's good, everybody? Scuba Dubert here. Welcome back to Love Music More. My guest today is Russ Flynn, principally known as the touring member of alternative rock band X Ambassadors. He's toured all over the world with them. We got really deep into touring stories. It was absolutely awesome. He's also an incredible jazz performer. He has played with all sorts of different artists like Great Good Fine OK and Sean Lennon. And he's also really schooled within music and a bunch of different genres. So that was one of my favorite things about this conversation, was talking about cross-genre work and the ways that both playing guitar and playing bass, he's better at that than I am, but like I understand it a little bit. And how they can kind of inform each other and the different paths that are available to multi-instrumentalists. He studied jazz performance at the University of Vermont and then jazz composition and arranging at the Aaron Copland School of Music. Great conversation. I'm really excited for it. Before we get there, I want to introduce you to DistroKid. DistroKid makes music distribution fun and easy, and I actually mean that. That is, I use them. They are awesome. They are both fun and easy. With unlimited uploads, and artists get to keep 100% of royalties and earnings. And again, mean it, you get 100% of what you put up there, unlike some other places. You can go to distrokid.com/VIP/love music more. You can get a 30% off discount, and you also support the show. 1 million plus artists rely on DistroKid to get their music onto Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all of the other major streaming services. And one of the things that I love is I've got a little mobile app that I'm able to pull up and check all of my stuff. I can send splits. I can add my lyrics. I can check my bank account, send my royalties to my bank. It is wonderful. And it's really nice to be able to do that on the go. And again, you keep 100%. So check it out at distrokid.com/VIP/love music more and get started with a 30% off discount. Getting unlimited music up there. Enjoy the episode.
Love music more. Love music more. Ooh, love music more.
What's good, everybody? I'm Scuba Dubert. Welcome back to Love Music More. I am joined with Russ Flynn. Welcome to the show, Russ.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm so excited to talk about touring, talk about guitars, talk about the ways that musicians can actually have other hobbies, which is something I've only sort of heard about. One of my recent guests, he was really into gastronomy and cooking and food chemistry and stuff like that, and he saw these parallels into his audio plugins. I'm excited to talk mixology, home brewing, and all of that, and maybe see if we can find some parallels to making the music. So I'm really excited for this conversation.
Likewise, sounds good to me.
Yeah. So I got to ask, first off, what's it like to be playing with, X Ambassadors internationally, navigating other cultures, playing these big stages? What's it actually really like? Put somebody in your shoes to be living that as a day-to-day.
I will say I don't think it's quite as glamorous as most people might think it is. I joke that I'm in places like Indianapolis a lot more frequently than I'm in places like Paris. It's a mixed bag in the sense that we do a lot of festival gigs, we do a lot of headline touring, private events, we do plenty of college shows. We do everything under the sun. Sometimes that means you're on a plane heading back home and you're on cloud nine, and sometimes you're like, oh man, what am I doing with my life? But the band has really passionate fans, and I love playing headline shows and seeing people sing the words to all the music. Sometimes you need to give more energy than the audience is giving, and sometimes they're giving more energy than you're giving, and you have to rise to that.
Love that. I love that. And also, it's such a good point about, Indianapolis. No hate to Indianapolis, but I understand
No.
in terms of the relative excitement or out of your day-to-day norm. Yes, that is a very fair point.
I do need to find a new way of phrasing that, because the last time we played in Indianapolis was this past fall, and we did an event for the Colts.
Cool.
And we noticed someone setting up some guitars elsewhere in another room. I was like, I'm going to go take a peek at those. And lo and behold, the guitars that were being set up were some of Jim Irsay's private collection, which happened to include Jerry Garcia's Tiger,
Oh,
the guitar that Kurt Cobain used in the Smells Like Teen Spirit video,
wow.
George Harrison's SG from
No.
Rubber Soul,
Yes.
the drum head from Ringo's bass drum from the Ed Sullivan Show.
No. Nuh-uh.
I swear.
Oh my God.
David Gilmour's Black Strat.
What?
Like
I didn't even know he sold
Eric,
that.
Eric Clapton's The Fool guitar, the crazy psychedelic painted one, that SG.
Yes.
And then non-musical items too, like JFK's rocking chair and the boots that Muhammad Ali wore in one of the really famous fights. I forget which fight it was. Maybe the Thrill in Manila. I don't know, but it was. And this guy, bless him, he
Yes.
like talked me through the whole collection for like 40 minutes, and he gave me his card. And I was like, "Holy cow, this is not what I expected." And just wandering in some catering hall room, but you know, Indianapolis, it surprises you.
That and actually I think that guitar collecting is a really fascinating thing because yeah, you have these pieces, but they're meant to be played, but they're also like they're historical entities unto themselves, so you want to put them in a museum. There's this weird tension in between like a living, breathing instrument and one that you want to like retire and gawk at or take a picture with.
Very much so. And I believe what Jim, the owner of the Colts, what he does is he will take them on the road, take some of these pieces on the road and book shows in, maybe like 500 to 1,000 cap venues and play with his band.
No way.
Play with his band, and his band will have like Kenny Aronoff in it and
Yes.
crazy session dudes.
Right.
And then besides that performance, then he'll have people speaking about the pieces in the collection, and he just wants to share them with folks.
That's the right way to be a billionaire, man.
Hey, it's how I would be a billionaire.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we need more music education out there so we can get the billionaires before they're billionaires and then they end up being cool guys that hire us to play
It's so
fun
true.
gigs.
Yeah, have a passion when they're flying to Mars.
Exactly. Well, that's such a good example, I think, of the chaos of tour. You never know what you're going to find, like you're saying, good, bad. I'd love to hear some stories of both sides of the aisle, if possible, of just like anything that comes to mind anywhere on that spectrum of just like, what am I doing with my life? Why did we play this venue, or how do we get hired here? Like a good example for one of mine is I was playing opening up with the Doobie Brothers, and we played Moose Jaw, Canada, and it was totally just a booming oil town that had enough money that they hired, and we played for like 400 people in this like weird empty hockey arena.
Yeah.
And the whole band was like, what was that? What did we just do?
I know. And
Brothers.
the joke is like, then you look at the check and you're like,
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
I hate to talk about it that way, but it's like at the end of the day, it's still the greatest job in the world to play music for people.
Right.
It's not always great. You don't get paid for the good days.
Yeah, that's a good one. Right.
And
exactly.
Sometimes you just gotta suck it up and do the job.
Yeah.
I think that certainly as I get older, I am 39 now, and I don't love bus touring. I don't sleep well on a bus, try as I might.
Yeah.
I get on a bus tour, I get into the rhythm of getting 4 hours a night, and it just is what it is. And so there's that.
I don't know if people know what it's like to actually sleep on a tour bus. Because like I feel like people have an image of this big tour bus. Everyone has a queen sized bed, but no, it's like kind of coffiny.
Unless you're Bon Jovi and you have a star bus, which is one person per bus, where you have like a back lounge that's been converted into a king size or queen size bedroom. Most bus touring is sleeping 12 people to a bus, or at best you have condo bunks, so you're sleeping 8 people to a bus. If you have 3 berths that are stacked, you take out the subdividers and divide them into 2, and that would be the condo bunk. So in most situations, you have 3, 3, 3, and 3. That's on an American bus. In Europe, typically they're 12, 14, or 16 berth buses.
I didn't know that.
And
I've never done a Europe
I find
tour.
I sleep better on European buses. They're usually double decker in Europe. and you have more separation between like the galley area and the bathroom, which is typically downstairs, and then the bunk area is typically upstairs. Often there's a forward lounge on the European buses that'll be situated above the driver. A lot of American buses, you'll have doors between a back lounge and a bunk area, and then a bunk area and a front lounge area slash driver area. But sometimes those doors are really noisy, and I always sleep passenger side, rear, middle.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a door that's closing right in my face if people are getting up early. It's hard. It's just really hard.
Totally.
Again, with the European buses, I find I sleep better. But the problem there is I'm 6'4",
Oh,
and all those ceilings are like 6'1", 6'2". So I'm walking with my neck twisted for a month or 6 weeks or whatever it is.
oh my God.
I mean, the benefit of bus touring is that you wake up in a city and you can go out and explore immediately before loading. But, the downside is that if you're me, you don't sleep well. And I don't hate flying, but I hate long haul flying. Like we were just in Australia for 2.5 weeks, and we finished the run in Perth, and I had to fly Perth to Sydney on a red eye, Virgin Australia, and then Sydney to LA on a red eye. So I woke up on Friday, whatever day it was, in Sydney. And then I also woke up on Friday, the same day in LA. It was like 5-hour flight, sit in an airport for 5 hours, get on a 15-hour flight, wake up. It's the same day, basically the same time as when I had landed in Sydney. And then I flew to New York, and then I drove to Philly.
Oh,
So it was like 35 hours when all was said and done.
Yeah.
And all the while, you need to sit there and, remind yourself of the great show experiences you had. That's what gets you through it. It's like, especially if you're sitting seat 42F by the bathroom, if you don't have status with a given airlines or something like that, it can be physically grueling and mentally grueling. And you just get off the plane and go get a good massage
yeah.
and try to remind yourself that playing music for people is a beautiful thing.
Yes. Yes. And that I think puts it so in perspective, because people they'll they'll have work travel, or they'll have personal travel, they have group travel, but they don't. Very few people have the combination of constant going all over the place, and then the mixed versions of travel, like being crammed into a bus and then flying on a plane, and like doing all of this like long chain of things that I think is a certain kind of torture and a certain kind of mental test that I don't know if a lot of people get to experience.
It's true. And I really get excited about going new places.
Yeah.
Like, going new places, experiencing new culture, experiencing new cuisine is
Yes.
everything to me. I
Yes.
mean, music is absolutely my first love, but like food and culture are right there with me with music. And I was having dinner with my dad last night, and I was looking at a US tour that we're gonna have coming a US tour that we're gonna have coming up in September. And then also I was talking about European dates that we'll have this summer.
Nice.
And even if it's tiny town in Hungary or Slovakia, whatever it might be, if it's someplace new, I'm jonesed about it.
Yeah.
Because I want to experience the gamut of what the world has to offer. Like there's something I love specifically about Eastern European towns where, they don't get a lot of music. And if they do, it's not American bands. I remember I played a jazz festival in Serbia like 12 or 13 years ago. And it was so fascinating to me because it was a pretty avant-garde outfit that I was playing with. I was playing with Elliot Sharp, who's like this iconic downtown jazz guitar player. It was so interesting because we were presenting the music of Willie Dixon, so like American blues music, but with this avant-garde downtown jazz twist to it. And I remember looking out in the audience there. It was like India or Novi Sad, Serbia. And you had the most wide range of folks in the audience. You had 6-year-olds and 90-year-olds. And I couldn't help but sit there and think like, oh man, like I'm sure that everyone just comes out for anything that's going on in this town because why not?
Mm-hmm.
And so many of these folks, especially the older folks, like they were probably censored aggressively during the Soviet era.
Interesting. Yes.
And anything American jazz related that's like free expression oriented is going to be thrilling to them. And I think of like Japanese culture is sort of similar like that, where jazz is such a thing in Japan. And I think largely because Japanese culture is my absolute favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's very structured
Mm-hmm.
and people find their niche and they operate in their niche and no one is too loud. And I mean that metaphorically.
Yeah.
No one is like, even like folks who are punks in Japan during the week, 9 to 5, they're straight-laced business persons who, are wearing a very limited color palette and have a sort of static routine to their lives. And then when they go out to a punk show or whatever, they throw on a mohawk and they wear like the ripped jacket and stuff. But like every rip in the jacket has been placed precisely. So it's a very structured culture, and I think that they have such an affinity for jazz because it's so antithetical to their everything.
Mm. Cool.
So I want to experience it all. That's the point.
Yes.
And I especially love places that might make the average person scratch their head like, why are you going there?
Yeah. What's good, guys? Scuba Dubert here for the Love Music More podcast, and I want to let you in on a little secret. One of my favorite new things, Minuendo lossless earplugs. So these are really, really, really cool. I've got 2 of them here. It comes in this awesome sweet box, but it comes with a bunch of little goodies like carrying case, tether, cleaning tools. But the real tech is in these little tiny lossless earplugs. My favorite thing about it is, one, you can swap out any of the included tips. So depending on the size of your ear canal, we're all built different. You can get a nice, comfortable fit. But there's also this little lever on these adjustable versions that can go from 7 to 25 decibels of cutting. So depending on if you're listening to new metal or jazz, you can just hit the little lever and adjust in real time. And I think that's really, really cool. For the longest time, I was listening in those awful foam earplugs, and it makes the music sound like that. It just cuts off all of those high frequencies. And so I was always tempted to sneak them out a little bit. Oh, it's my favorite song, no earplugs. And then you get hearing damage. You have tinnitus after the show, and then you come back, you want to work in the studio, and guess what? Your ears aren't right. And that's why I love Minuendo, because you can just pop these in and have full fidelity with these lossless earplugs. There are 2 different versions. One is adjustable with the little lever, and then this one is fixed at 17 decibels. So check out Minuendo, Minuendo.com, or you can search them on Amazon and find Minuendo earplugs today. Get cracking.
Like, I want that.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, this is where I think we could circle back to the initial tease of your love of spirits and brewing and all that, because I think that all those things are intertwined where, like you're saying, food and drink and language and music, all those are means by which to communicate culture from one person and to like share and have community. Could you talk a little bit about how maybe that might all align in your head or in ways that they might intersect?
Yeah, I will say when I'm cooking and when I'm making music, be it as a improviser or purely as a mixing engineer, whatever it might be.
Yes.
I have a lot of irons in the fire at any given time, but like my headspace is very, very similar. When I'm cooking in a kitchen and I want to make something new, it's very rare that I'm following a recipe explicitly. More often than not, I will take a survey of like 6 to 10 recipes, see what the integral components are, the integral ingredients are, and then take it from there with some improvisation.
I like that.
I guess growing up, like I never really saw the distinction between one medium and another. It was maybe I found myself reaching a higher level of proficiency more quickly in one medium than another. Like I feel like I understood cooking quickly and I understood music somewhat quickly. And so I pursued those disciplines. But, I feel like if you're a creative individual, and I mean that like there's like the big C creative, like in like corporate speech, people are like, oh, that person's a creative, like a capital C, and I don't know, I feel uncomfortable with that a little bit. But like when I say a creative person, I mean someone who's just perpetually propelled to create. I've always been blessed and plagued with that. I remember having a conversation with my tour manager years ago about that. And he's like, I love music and I love food, but I'm not a creative person
Mm,
because I don't lose sleep on a Tuesday because I'm not doing enough.
right.
And
Yep.
I lose sleep on a
Yep.
Tuesday because I'm not doing enough.
Yep. Totally. I
Like
do.
I'm constantly hit with the idea of like, what is my legacy,
Hmm.
and am I engaged enough creatively to be happy, blah 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 blah. That's the downside of it. The upside of it is of course that creating is a beautiful thing, and I love waking up and feeling inspired and making something that wasn't there yesterday, be it food, be it beer. I've been homebrewing for 20 years now. Be it a song, even if no one hears it. Like I love that. I
Hmm.
love that. And I have to constantly stay engaged with that in some capacity. But that's all to say, if it's cooking, if it's brewing, if it's music, I can go to bed and rest easy if I did something and made something that day. And I don't know if that's the way that everyone operates. You joked earlier about musicians with other hobbies. It's true. Like I have lots of friends who are musicians who don't have other hobbies. Or if they do, they're a guitar player and like they have the hobby of collecting vintage gear or something. And like I do that too. I love collecting vintage gear and I love collecting guitars. I also love collecting spirits. And when I'm out on the road, if I find myself with downtime, I'll go to 6 or 7 stores hunting for specific bottles or great deals or something. And maybe I won't even buy anything. And that can really tick people off that I'm on the road with. It's like, you want to go to a liquor store with me? And people are like, sure, yeah. And they don't realize what a commitment that is.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
might walk around for an hour and just leave without getting anything, or talk to the clerk for half an hour and learn something or teach them something. Just because I'm walking away physically empty handed doesn't mean that I'm walking away empty handed metaphorically, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. Experientially.
Experientially, yeah, yeah. I feel the need to create stuff, and it doesn't always have to be music. And I feel like that's a blessing in
Yeah.
some ways,
Yeah.
because if I get burnt out on music for a while, I can
Hmm.
just say, you know what, I'm not going to play for a week,
Yeah.
and I'm going to make ramen every day and try to dial that in,
That's so cool. That's so
you
cool.
know?
I do. And I actually, I've gone through that myself. I was so music obsessed for so long. And then I started to allow myself to have other hobbies. And then my music got better.
Yeah.
I really think that one cup filled the other. And not just taking the break, but honestly, like one thing I'd like to zero in on is your concept of influence. Like as an accomplished, you've played so many different genres, you've played with so many different acts, and also the way that you were talking about surveying and taking the essential nature and then improvising on top of it. I just in my head I was like, oh yeah, that's like one of the best advices to be like, how do I learn how to do a guitar solo? It's like, try that.
I think with food or with music, and this is in particular with working for other people as a side person, I liken working with someone as a side person to cooking for a specific set of people.
Oh,
And I
cool.
love cooking for large groups, like 20 people. I love knowing the tastes of a given group,
Okay.
because like I love so many different genres of music and I love so many different genres of food, and I've never like really settled on my identity being like a jazz bass player or like a rock guitar player or whatever else. I love just serving the moment and wanting to share in a great musical experience with people. So if I'm playing a jazz gig or if I'm playing a rock gig or it's a Latin gig or whatever it is, I don't want to know what the band leader or the person in charge wants from me because I want to like pander to them.
Yeah.
It's so much more positive and genuine and authentic than that. I want to serve the music in the best way I can possible. So I want to know what do you want from me? What's the gig? Do you want me to improvise and stretch, or do you want me to play like clean and concise solos? Do you want me to move on stage, or do you not want me to move
Mm,
on stage?
right. The
There's so
physical.
much more than just like the musical too. It's like, what's the sound I'm going for? And you're not going to insult me by telling me you want this, that, or the other thing. Like I love rising to the challenge of nailing the gig.
Mm.
You know,
Hmm.
I love playing lots of different music, and I love stepping away from the gig and being like, okay, I gave it my best. I could improve in this way or that way. The band leader would have been more pleased with my work if I had done X, Y, or Z. I want to know these things. I'm not going to get butthurt about it. That's taken time.
Mm.
I think my younger self, when there was more ego in what I was doing, I think it was easy for me to get insulted and not take criticism constructively.
How do you work on that? Like,
Um,
what are some tips if somebody was like, hey, that's me. That's where I'm at. Russ is where I want to get to. How do I bridge that gap?
I think I always want to be the most complete musician that I can. And that's not to say I want to be like a jack of all trades, because that can work against you. I think when I was younger, it was like, okay, because my identity wasn't resting in one particular instrument. It's like I was getting high off the initial rush of
Uh,
immediate gratification with specific instruments. Like, okay, I'm going to play mandolin today, and I can get good quickly up to a point here, and
right.
I can play piano tomorrow and get good quickly up to a point, and I would just move on instead of like working past these entropy plateaus. But I think making the decided choice to want to be the best musician that I can be, and if someone finds gaps in my playing, to want to address them from like a mindset of positivity. Years ago, I realized that, and I was having a conversation with some guy I was working with. This is actually when we were in undergrad. We were in undergrad together, and we both came out of practice rooms. And he was like, "How long have you been here today?" Because it was really late. And I was like, "Oh, I've been practicing for 10 hours." And he was like, "Have you been practicing, or have you been playing?" And that was a really insightful moment to me. And I was like, "Okay, yeah." And I guess I was just playing all day because it's important to play, but playing is usually for me. Practicing is also for me, but it's hard. Practicing means sounding bad.
Yes.
Like in order to
Hmm.
practice, you should sound bad. And that's not always an easy pill to swallow. If I try to balance it when I sit down and pick up a guitar, pick up a bass. I try to like improvise for a little while or play something that I know well, and that reassures me that I know what I'm doing and I can play.
Cool. Yep.
And then it's time to practice, and practicing means sounding bad. In my mind, that's my perspective. I take that as a challenge now. Again, come at it positively, make a commitment to be able to do whatever it is I'm working on, by the end of next week.
Mm.
I've been working through a book recently called The Subversive Guitar Player
Cool.
by this guy.
I haven't heard of
I
it.
think his name is Joe Gore. He was a contributing writer for Premier Guitar for a long time. And it's really interesting. He's a classically trained musician, but he's also an improvising musician. He played with, I think, PJ Harvey for a while and maybe Tom Waits for a while or
Cool.
something. And there's lots of stuff in the book that is really easy for me to do. And there's lots of stuff in the book that's really hard for me to do. And I kind of love it. Becomes a game. It's like sitting down and finding something that you can't do at all.
Yes. Yes.
And then by the end of the day or end of the week, whatever, end of the month, whatever it is, being able to do it, that feels like playing a great show to me.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
The thing that I was working on recently out of that book was like moving a clave around
Ooh.
between my feet and my hands.
Cool.
And I remember like when I was younger, I was really into Al Di Meola,
Yes.
and I was really into Charlie Hunter too. And
Yeah.
both those players,
Both awesome.
like Charlie Hunter would have a pandero play with his foot
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And do these really complicated rhythms. I mean, he's doing everything that's really
Right.
complicated.
Right.
But I remember being so in awe of that. And
Is
then
that part
Al
of
Di Meola
is that
would
part of the
often,
reason
like,
why you do bass and guitar?
yeah, kind of.
Yeah, cool.
Kind of, yeah.
Charlie Hunter a little
It's
bit.
funny. I saw one of those Novak guitars on Craigslist yesterday, and I was like,
Is it
"Oh,
time?
is that what it was?" Yeah. But Al Di Meola would often play. He's so schooled in the flamenco thing, and he would often play with a clave in one of his feet, and
Awesome.
that was mind-boggling to me. And in this book by Joe Gore, he talked about doing it, and I was like, I'm not skipping any exercises in this book. Whatever it is, as long as it takes me, I'm going to do it. And the end of those days where I finally was like playing something really simple in the hands, but like tapping a clave with my foot, which I know to drummers out there
Yeah,
sounds so
right.
incredibly easy. But
Not
to
to
me,
no, not to me either.
me never using my feet,
Right.
uh, that felt
Also,
like
and
Mount Everest to me.
it's also, and for the people that don't know clave, like it's not like tapping a quarter note. You know, like
Right.
now you're internalizing a different rhythm, a different set of like strong, weak, and that alone is difficult on its own. And then
Yeah.
to internalize that and play guitar at the same time, like playing two instruments, using your body in a new way, that is more than just mind over matter. It is physically like your neurons have to reshuffle and resync. You are doing stuff that necessitates practice.
Yeah. And it can be so incredibly frustrating. And you take the metronome all the way down as low as it goes, and you're like, I'm never going to do this. And then suddenly it clicks, and yeah, those like synapses in your brain.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on,
Yes.
but they form in a new way, and you feel like $1,000,000. It's like playing in front of 10,000 people to me.
Do you need sleep in order to like get over some humps, or are you able to kind of get it in the course of a long practice session or taking breaks throughout like one day?
I think because of the bus touring, I'm pretty well practiced with
Cool.
having very little sleep. If
Yeah.
I can get 6 hours, I'm good.
Nice.
Honestly,
Yeah, it's a superpower too.
yeah, I'm pretty useless on less than 5 hours. I can still play a show because I can still play a show with X Ambassadors because I've done it so many times.
Yeah.
The music is so ingrained.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't feel comfortable going out and playing like an improvised set with new people on 5 hours of sleep. I would be doing them a disservice. And
Yes.
I would make sure that I wasn't in that physical state going and
Right.
playing with people.
Right.
I never want to let an audience down, but also I never want to let the people down who I'm playing with on stage. And as you know, we talked about my love of spirits and my love of homebrewing and stuff like that, but I always play sober, stone cold sober.
Mm.
And people make fun of me for that. You know, people joke like, if Jimi Hendrix came back from the grave and asked you to play after you had a beer, you'd say no. And I'd like, yeah, I would. Or like Obama, if Obama, called you after a couple beers and wanted you to go to play at the White House, I'd say, sorry, Mr. President, I'm not in the headspace to do that. Just because I feel like playing under the influence takes practice, and that's not something I want to practice. If you want to do that, that's cool. I do not judge anybody for anything, but
Yeah.
I feel like I am most committed to the audience and I'm most committed to people on stage with me when I'm sober. And that's just a choice that I made. I was talking about horror stories.
Yeah.
Not to go on too much of a tangent, but on that same tour where I played that jazz festival in Serbia, I was playing the Mannheim Jazz Festival.
Cool.
And I had done the gig and I was wandering around town with two of the guys in the band. And we saw some people on the street and started talking to them. And it turns out that they were going to a jazz recital for some students. And we were like, oh, cool. Can we come? And so we tagged along and went to this big ornate music building. And I walk in the room and the drummer is my friend, David Aunlauf, who I went to grad school with. Amazing jazz drummer. He's from, where's he from originally? Maybe Stuttgart or something like that. Anyway, so we went to Queens College together and did our grad work there. And he was like, Russ, I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. He's like, you got to come up and play. And I wasn't wasted, but I wasn't sober either. And on this tour, I was playing electric bass and I hadn't touched upright in years.
Ooh.
It had been a couple of years.
Ooh.
And of course, I wasn't carrying my instrument on me. There was an upright there. And so Dave was like, come up and play. And then introduces me to this auditorium of kids and their parents.
Oh,
Russ Flynn from New York, jazz bass player. And I get up and I was like, man, I haven't played upright in a long time.
Oh, no.
And
the most punishing instrument
I know,
around.
I know. And I made an absolute fool of myself. And that was the last time where I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I should have said no. I should have said no.
Yeah. I've got some big news, everybody. My vinyl record is out. We didn't make a ton of these, so these guys are going to sell out, and I would love for you to get your hands on one of them because they're so dope. They're so dope. And it comes with a whole bunch of like liner notes and pictures and special stuff, the things that really went into making this record. And I want you to get your hands on it. So go to scoobertdoober.pizza or check out my Instagram for a link, or click the link in the show notes or the bio or wherever you're watching this to pick up your copy. They're going to sell out. We really did not make very many of these, and I want you to have it. It's like a collector's item. So thank you. Thank you for supporting my music, and I can't wait for you to hear it actually on physical vinyl. Enjoy the rest of the episode. Everybody needs to figure out their own personal ethos and what do they stand for? What do they,
For sure.
even if you're religious, even if you come from a school of thought, ultimately the decision is up to you. Like, what are you going to stand for? What are you going to do? What are you going to live by?
Yeah.
Ultimate flexibility, person to person. But I respect and understand that this is my relationship to music. I want to maintain it that way.
Yeah. I'm routine oriented to some degree. So many great musicians I've worked with are routine oriented. And if like your routine is having 2 beers before you go on stage, like the keyboard player and ex-ambassadors, no more, no less, 2 beers always.
Cool.
It's his routine.
Yeah.
The singer, he does a half an hour of yoga, then he does a half hour of vocal warm-ups. I need a metronome and to run some scales.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually put a cough drop in my mouth before I go on stage.
Cool.
I know it's weird.
Yeah, I love it.
But it's my thing. And if your thing is taking LSD before you go on stage,
right,
groovy. I don't care.
It's going to inform your music. Yeah.
Let's make some music.
But like every pro athlete has got the same kind of thing. They've got their rituals, they've got their methods. And there's something to it too of like, sometimes I forget that I can play music, if that makes sense. Just like you're saying, like starting off a practice session, like improvising or doing something to like remind yourself, like you've practiced, you've earned this. Yeah. But just me as a person, it's like, oh, you didn't pick up guitar today. It's like, can I still do this? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can. But easing into that state of mind, of that connection of like mind and body, all of those things, it's not a light switch as much as people want it to be or expect it to be, of like, hey, play something for me. It's like, yeah, I can do that, but it's not going to be, you're going to see me at some rough stage of warm up. Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's the greatest job in the world, which I've said, but sometimes it's hard. And to go out on stage and give it 110% is not always easy. I mean, I've played gigs with the flu, with like a torn ligament in my foot, like with food poisoning. I remember I played a gig at Brooklyn Steel with ex-ambassadors a few years ago. And I grew up on Long Island. All my family's on Long Island. And my sister came and her husband and my dad came. And all these friends came. And I texted everyone before the show. I was like, I'm so sorry. You will not see me tonight. I have food poisoning. I have a fever. I'm doing the gig, but it doesn't mean that I'm healthy. And I said to my dad, I was like, please meet me at the back door of the venue immediately after we're done. I need you to take me home.
Wow. And
luckily the next day was an off day.
Yeah.
The following show was in Boston, and I was able to just not ride on the bus that night and stay in my own bed in Brooklyn. I'm committed to the gig. I always want to be tough as nails when it comes to the gig, but anything else, I try to be forgiving of myself and try to be easy on myself. Sometimes that means disappointing people socially. It's tough though, because the people coming to the show, that's their getaway and that's an exciting night for them. And you want to be respectful of that and stuff, but doing it night after night takes energy. I try to be as gracious as I can with my time and energy, but I always try to prioritize the gig because it's going to sit with me if I don't.
Yes. And I just find it so fascinating, the parallels, like a NBA player or something like that, where,
and very similar in the regard that NBA players have to be primed to be at their peak performance in the evening.
That's a good point. Right. Which is exact opposite of most of the world.
Yeah. And I've always been a night owl. When I was in grad school, I remember all my classes started after 4 p.m. It was meant to accommodate people who were getting their masters after teaching.
Oh, cool.
In like New York City public schools and stuff like that.
Right. Makes sense.
That was a very common path.
Totally.
And the days that I wasn't in class, I was teaching private lessons around New York and stuff. And so most days didn't have anything to do until 4 p.m. And I would stay up till all hours of the evening. And I'm still kind of like that when I'm home and left to my own devices. it's kind of ironic, but when I'm on the road, I actually go to bed much earlier than I
Hmm.
do when I'm home. And it's not the case with the guys that tour with, the folks that tour with, because some of them have kids. They're usually waking up at 5 a.m. And when I'm home, sometimes I'm going to bed at 5 a.m.
Yes.
But
Right.
I do think that it's something that I've been conditioned. I have maybe a natural, that is part of my natural rhythm, but also I've just been conditioned my whole life
Mm.
to be in peak performance at 8 or 9 p.m., and you get off stage at 10 or 11 or midnight or whatever it is, and you need a couple hours to unwind, just the way that someone who's getting off a conventional job at 5 p.m. needs a couple hours to unwind.
Yes.
It's just shifted.
Yes. Exactly. Well, and just like it's hard to turn the light switch on, it's also hard to turn it off. Where you come off of the stage, you can't just be like bedtime. It's like that is physically impossible. You've wound yourself up, your cortisol and everything is just so high.
Absolutely.
You have to have some sort of ramp off. Yeah.
And sometimes I will take melatonin to
Yeah.
help with that. I take a very, very small dose. I take 3 milligrams. And perhaps it's even placebo. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
the action
Mm-hmm.
of doing that physically.
It's the inverse cough drop, man.
Inverse cough drop. Yeah. I also
Mhm.
just feel inspired at night. I think
Yeah.
so many people I know find inspiration in quiet mornings
Yes.
before everyone is awake, and the sort of solitude that that brings in a positive way. And I feel the same on the opposite side of the clock. 3 a.m. when the world is quiet, the ideas come most fluidly for me.
All those things are really important markers to follow in terms of like, yeah, where am I going to be most successful? Following on the NBA thing, NBA players always have a really hard time. Like West Coast players, they'll play a Sunday noon game on the East Coast. And so it's like 9 a.m. for them. That's always like their worst game of the season because it's
Yeah.
just completely inverted of what their performance tuned towards. Their routine is completely disrupted. No naps, no workout in the morning. It's just completely
Yeah.
flipped. Like maybe like a radio spot or a Good Morning America or something like that might be the closest.
I remember we did Good Morning America one time, and I think my call was like 4 a.m., but the
No,
poor crew, their call
no,
was midnight.
no, God,
That is brutal.
brutal.
That is brutal.
How do you even plan your day for that? Wow.
You don't.
You don't, yeah.
You plan to sleep afterwards. Honestly,
Exactly.
when I go to the West Coast,
Yeah.
I feel like a normal human being,
Mm,
because suddenly instead of waking up at 9 or 10, I'm waking up at 6 or 7, and it's like,
right,
wow, okay,
right.
I'm a
That's true.
functioning member of society.
Yeah, there's a line at Starbucks. How weird.
Yeah, God.
I wanted to ask you about the guitar and bass connection for you, because I always find that interesting for people that specialize on both instruments rather than just dip into both instruments. How did that come about? What's your perspective on it? How do you see the similarities and differences between the two?
I started on guitar in middle school. It's a classic scenario where I was not as accomplished on the instrument as another friend of mine, and we formed a band. And
Yes.
so, because I was a lesser guitar player than he was, it was only logical that I would play bass. I didn't have a bass. I borrowed the drummer's older brother's bass.
Cool.
I don't even know what it was. It was probably like a Sam Ash in-house brand or something like that. And anyway, so I
Yep.
eventually got a bass in 8th grade, and I played bass in that band. And then I also maintained practice with guitar,
Hmm.
and I formed another band.
Cool. Cool.
And it was really just that simple. It was
Right.
like, okay, I still have a desire to play guitar,
Mm.
and I have this other group of friends who I'm going to play guitar with. And
Yes.
then in that first band that I formed, I was the bass player, and that just
Cool.
maintained.
That's great.
And I've never really thought about it as it being as clear as that, but that's what
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah. You had a fork in the road and you just chose both.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I went to undergrad, and I was still pursuing guitar most passionately, but there were so many guitar players. I went to UVM, University of Vermont, and everyone was obsessed with Fish, myself included.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted to be Trey. My grandmother had taken me into Sam Ash, Christmas in 8th grade, and she said, "Any bass you want."
Aw.
And I still have that jazz bass,
Cool.
an American Standard jazz bass in Sunburst, one of my most prized possessions.
Oh, love it.
Because she wasn't wealthy. She was a nurse. It was a huge financial commitment for her, and so appreciative of that gift. But I was at UVM, so many guitar players, and I was like, whoa, I can get work if I'm playing bass. So I started doing that. And then that became my academic focus. And then faculty there said, if you want to play bass, you have to play the real bass.
Ah.
So then I had to play upright, and did so begrudgingly. I did not have any interest in playing upright, and
How
I
did
had
you get
such a
past how'd you get past that plateau then? Because it's the most unfree. I've tried and it just tears up your hands. You feel
yeah,
like you just got beat up every time you play that damn instrument.
yeah. And I remember, I started playing so much of it
Yeah.
that I would get all these blood blisters and have to
Yes.
like super glue my fingers. And I didn't really fall in love with the upright bass until it wasn't a matter of people forcing it down my throat anymore.
Okay.
I finished undergrad, and because I went to grad school for composition and arranging, I wasn't so much academically pursuing performance anymore. No one was forcing me to play upright, and so then I could come at it at my own pace,
Hmm.
how I wanted to come at it, which was not academic whatsoever. Like I play upright in a really unconventional way. Like I hold the bass in between my knees,
Cool.
and I don't play. I use both fingers. I don't play with like
Yeah.
one finger, and
Uh-huh.
my technique's just all weird
Yeah.
because it was what ergonomically made sense to me
Yep.
once people weren't telling me I had to do it a certain way.
Yeah. Okay.
I studied with Ben Allison for a while, who was a great New York upright player. He's done a lot of music for NPR. Super great dude, and someone I've always respected as a composer as well as a player. And
Mm.
he has a really unconventional technique, and so that made me feel comfortable that I could do the
Yes.
same.
Great.
I was playing upright, I was playing electric bass, I was playing guitar, and different people knew me for doing different things, and a lot of people didn't necessarily know that I did whatever else,
Ooh,
and
cool. That's cool.
I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah, right. That's pretty
It was
fun.
cool.
Right.
I did feel like some things on bass helped me be a better guitar player, and some things on guitar helped me be a better bass player.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there were things that hurt me. I remember
Okay.
being in a jam session sometime
Yeah.
and having a conversation after I had been playing guitar, and I was like, "Oh, I play bass too." And the guy, it was someone older, and he's like, "Yeah, you sound like a bass player." And I was like, "What is that supposed to mean?" You know, that sat with me for a while.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
What a bird. Just
so
kidding.
then I I became hell bent on
Yeah.
being a convincing player on both
Yeah.
instruments,
Right. Right.
and I love doing both. And when I don't do one for a little while, I do feel like my calluses change in a certain way, and
Yeah.
I'm most happy when I'm doing both consistently.
Cool. Yeah.
And I love bouncing between roles,
Yeah.
being like just a pocket bass player who is hell bent on serving the moment and locking in with the drummer
Uh-huh.
and not doing anything flashy, and then playing guitar and maybe inserting a little bit more ego into it or
Right.
something.
Yeah, totally.
It stays exciting for me like that.
I love that. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it is funny because a lot of people I think view them as it's a guitar with four strings, you know, but just
And a lot of people think it's easier.
right, that it's easier. Yes.
I watched an interview with Michael League from Snarky Puppy a few weeks ago, and he said something that stuck with me. He said, I think bass is the easiest instrument to develop some level of fluency on.
Hmm.
But I think bass is the hardest instrument to master.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
really agree with that. I remember years ago in New York
Mm-hmm.
doing some gigs where I was on the same bill as Tim LaFave, and him and I having some great conversations. And something that Tim said that really stuck with me about bass playing was that a great bass player is thinking about the envelope of their notes,
Mm.
almost like an
I agree.
ADSR on a synth.
Yes. 100%. 100%.
Like
Yes.
it really became something that I started thinking about consciously. Where does my note start, but where does my note end?
Yep.
And how do I shape it with left hand muting or right hand muting?
Yes.
How does my right hand position affect the envelope of my note?
Yes. Yes.
Am I playing back towards the bridge and getting a really sharp transient, or am I playing towards the neck and having a very soft transient with a soft bloom to it? There's like the old Lee Sklar thing where he has like a fake switch on his bass that he
Yeah.
calls the producer switch.
Yeah.
And if the producer wasn't liking what he was doing, he would flip this non-effective switch and just move his hand position. And everyone undoubtedly would say, like, that's it, that's the sound, you know. I think bass is really, really hard
Yeah.
to master.
Yeah.
And I'm not a master.
Yeah.
But I want to master.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
This thing that still is hardest for me is I'm a guitarist that plays bass. That is still what I am. But right hand technique and muting with my right hand. I'm so used to muting with my left hand, but it has such a different sound. Like I can mute with the two fingers, but like I don't know, just the level of acuity that I watch really good bass players be able to do with their right hand to do that tone shaping. To be like,
Yeah.
I'm going to cut the note off, but I'm not just going to mute it like I would up here. I am going to dampen it. I'm going to roll it off. It's like, man, I can do that in Pro Tools. Like I could hear I can hear what I want it to sound like too. But gosh,
Yeah,
especially
someone
at
like
speed.
Pino or
Yes.
Sean Hurley.
Exactly.
Oh my God,
Exactly.
those guys. And I love the Pino thing of using your thumb.
Me
I
too.
use a lot of thumb.
I got a thumb callus.
Yeah, man.
I got
That's
really
where it's
excited
at.
about that. Yeah.
I liken
Yeah.
the playing with my thumb
Uh-huh.
perhaps to like the James Jamerson claw thing,
Mm-hmm.
where it's limiting,
Yeah.
and through that limitation, it forces better rhythmic accuracy.
Okay.
And I feel like, speaking of right hand muting,
Yep.
with the thumb and then placement of the palm behind it,
Yeah.
I can have more control over muting.
100%.
So I find myself playing with thumb more than I find myself playing with
Cool.
fingers.
Hey, great. Me too. But I
I
wasn't
used to
sure
be
if I was
very
just cheating.
anti-pick on bass. I used to
Anti-pick?
be very, very anti-pick. I'm no longer anti-pick because I didn't think that was a healthy headspace to operate in. Open to everything.
But yeah, thumb is special. Like and like you're saying, it unlocked the part that I, like of palm muting that I focus so much on guitar. Of like, am I doing more of like a pizzicato kind of thing, or am I choking it? Am I doing like gruff power chords? All of that work on like I don't know, palm placement. I was able to unlock once I started using the thumb, and I was like, okay, another bridge across from the instrument I'm good at to the instrument I'm trying to be good at.
Yeah, man, so much to get into with right hand technique. And then like, practicing playing the same passages, alternating between thumb and fingers.
That's good. I need to do that. That's smart.
And pick two and
Right.
trying to make them sound uniform in
Yeah.
terms of like, it's so nerdy, but I used to sit with a compressor and try to hit like
Cool.
the same point
of how much like it's
1136,
gain reduction over and over. That's cool. That's a good idea. It's a really good
I
idea.
remember
'cause
hearing
you-
about some session player in Nashville doing that years ago, and I was
Smart.
like, "Oh,
Yes,
that's badass! I want to
that
do
is.
that."
That is totally. I mean, I think the closest thing that I do is I'll loop. I loop record like crazy. I just burn through my disk space, and that's when I'll shuffle all the different positions because it's just me. Like I'm not taking anybody else's time, so I can use as much of it as I want. It turns into a practice session, sort of like that. Of like I have the exact sound that I'm trying to reach, and I'm going to try like 15 different vistas to try to hit that sound. But I
sure.
really like the idea of actually trying to hit the meter and. Shit! Oh, that's
It's
hard.
so hard.
No, it sounds super hard.
It's super hard, and then it also makes you think about your instrument too.
Yeah.
And I'm passionate about guitar repair the way that I think a lot of folks are passionate about car repair. Like my
Cool.
dad.
Cool. Yeah.
My dad is an amazing mechanic, and he sees a car, hears a car, and if there's something awry with it, he wants to get to the bottom of it.
Cool.
And I'm
Yes.
the same way with instruments. I do all my own work. I don't really touch fretwork, but anything else, I love swapping pickups and pots and whatever else. And I remember talking to an engineer friend of mine a while back, and he was like, I hate it when bass players show up to gigs and the output of their instrument is, all over the place from string to string. There's no balance. And how do they not hear that? How do they not want to fix that? And it made me go home and say, all right, let me look at the output of like
Cool. Yeah.
all of my basses. And if something isn't even, let me try raising or lowering pickup heights, and let me try swapping pickups,
Cool.
whatever it is.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I want to have I want to provide the most even foundation that I can.
Yes. And it's
And if it's going to be uneven, I
uh,
want it to be conscious
yes, you want it to be a cool uneven. Yeah,
choice.
choice. Yes. No, I mean, that's one of the things that I find most frustrating about my own bass playing is a lot of times I'll be writing and playing at the same time, and that will add more jaggedness because if I'm like grooving on the same thing over and over, I can find those grooves in terms of dynamics, but
Yeah.
I still lack a lot of facility. And when I get a bass track from somebody like Bubby Lewis, who's my go-to for a lot of these things, it's like, oh, like I can compress if I want the sound. I
Yeah.
don't need
Yeah.
to, but like if I want a little bit of the character of the compressor, I guess for me it's a little bit more of like a prerequisite. Like we need to get 1176 on this this thing
Yeah.
stat. But I'm
And
getting
this is
better.
something that we appreciate as musicians.
Yeah,
It's something that the non-musician
yeah,
has no understanding. I don't want to say they don't have appreciation for it. They don't know
no,
to appreciate it.
right. Sorry to interrupt this very important broadcast, but it's time for one more advertisement for myself for this podcast. What I'm asking for is for you to rate it 5 stars, share it with your friends. This is like the most important thing for this podcast to grow. So if you want to do this, you go onto the podcast screen, right? You click on the dot 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 on Spotify. Under there it says rate show, and you go and you click it. 5 stars. If you could do that for me, that's the best way for the algorithms, all this stuff to share it out with the world. I know that it's a lot to ask, but if you could please just hit those 3 dots and then a 5 star, it would really help us out and helps us, get the word out and spread the love of music. So thank you. If you're listening on YouTube, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much. And here's the rest of the episode.
They don't know that it's a factor, but it could be the difference between something making you move and
Yes.
something not
Yes.
compelling you to move.
100%. And it's also like all of these things are like platonic ideals that you'll never quite hit. And sometimes the tendencies that you'll have just naturally, not equipment. You want to eliminate that as much as possible. But that's at least maybe the stories that I tell myself to make me go to bed at night. But like
Yeah.
I make music for myself. Like I make my own artist stuff. I'm doing less like the sideman stuff now. And so it's
Yeah.
like, some of the rough edges, like that's just me. That's just what I look like naked in the mirror. Like,
Totally. Yeah. I think in this day and age where it's so easy to get caught up in the minutia
mhm.
and to endlessly melodyne
Yeah.
or auto tune or edit something and flex time something, it's so easy to take the humanity out of something.
Mhm.
And I feel like we as a music culture are now starting to appreciate human idiosyncrasies
Yeah.
and imperfection.
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, Sam, the singer in X Ambassadors, he played Dijon for me the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Why is it amazing? Because it's so human when it wants to be human.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is it's imperfect in a beautiful way. And it's so perfect when it wants to be perfect.
Mhm.
And the juxtaposition of those two ideologies or approaches is really cool and really modern to me.
I agree.
I love that.
I do too. It's a great point for us to arrive at from the like hyper clean early digital that sounds sterile but also kind of has its own vibe to the like
Yeah.
CD era, all of the way that they were recording it and transitioning from the analog to the digital, and it's kind of a hodgepodge in between. And now we finally figured out how to replicate the analog in the digital. And the people go sometimes way too far and everything's way oversaturated.
I know.
But like it almost feels like we're figuring out the technology like 25 however long 35 40 years after it's introduced. It's a special
Yeah,
time, I think.
it's been a really interesting evolution in our lifetime. Are you about my age? I'm
No,
39.
I'm a bit younger. I'm in my early 30s, but
Okay.
like
But
same
nonetheless,
gist.
in our lifetimes,
Yeah.
we've experienced,
I've been making music for 17 years, so
yeah, yeah. We've seen the light bulb go off and people arrive at the conclusion that maybe like cleaner is not always better.
yeah.
And now we're still trying to find the balance. But it's a really interesting thing because folks a generation older than us,
Hmm.
I think, it was like progress is progress. And you could make the same comparison with food, where it was like
Ooh,
in the 1950s and 1960s
yeah.
with our parents, Bisquick, now with, something or other, it's progress
Mm,
in food was seen as nothing but beneficial. We can synthesize things in a laboratory
yeah,
rather than grow
yeah.
them in a field or whatever it might be. At some point in the 90s and early 2000s, similarly with music,
Mm,
we as a society said, hold on a second, maybe progress is not always progress.
mm.
you know and and there are things to be taken from pristine digital recording techniques, like
Yes.
SSLs are great when you want an SSL, but like there's something great about a 1073 when
Yeah.
you want a gritty Neve sound. And in like high level, cuisine, I think there's now a very similar approach. Like one of my favorite chefs is Francis Malaman, the Argentine, Patagonian,
Cool.
open flame
Sweet.
chef.
Sounds delicious.
And what I love about him is like, yeah, he does all this uses all these indigenous cooking techniques. He'll like bury gourds in the earth with hot coals for a day, or do like these salt bakes with fish. Everything is with open flame. He's got a great cookbook called On Fire. I highly recommend it. But he's classically trained and has won the French Grand Prix.
Mm,
I think he's got a couple of Michelin stars.
wow. Yep.
He is like this ultimate hybridization of high level classical technique
Hmm.
and like gritty, seemingly archaic technique.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're arriving
Hmm.
as a music culture as well,
Hmm.
where like there's something to pull from both sides of the argument.
Yeah. And I mean, I like it. I like looking at it that way because it reflects what our revulsion and codependence on technology is just in our day-to-day lives with social media. And traveling actually is really dangerous for me because I find myself investing so much on screen time that I come back home and I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like I have a phone addiction now because I was on a
Yeah,
plane for 15 hours. But like those things accurately reflecting it in culture and art and food, all of those kind of areas, I find that really fascinating because it feels like we're turning the page into a new chapter of art history or cultural history that
yeah,
I like. I like more than the last one personally.
I agree. Yeah, we have everything at our disposal.
Yeah,
We should dip into everything in moderation.
yeah,
Um,
and you can't put it back in. Like
yeah,
social media is here. Like doesn't matter what you do. That's part of what it's like to grow up now.
exactly. And it's an incredible achievement.
Yeah,
The connectivity that it
right,
provides
right.
for us as a society is amazing.
Yeah,
But I feel the same way. Sometimes I travel and I'm on a plane for 8 hours and I realize, oh, I was on my phone for 7 of those 8 hours,
yeah.
especially now that there's Wi-Fi
I
on
know, I know.
most planes.
Yes, yes.
I'm happy that I can respond to an email quickly, but at the same time, I'm just
Uh huh.
doom scrolling and
Uh
it's
huh.
not productive.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that I've done in the
Sure.
past 6 months that I feel like has pushed me to utilize technology in the best way I can is I listen to a new record every day.
Cool. Yes. Awesome.
And as soon as anyone mentions anything to me,
Hmm.
I add it to my list.
Yeah.
And then I spin a randomizer wheel every night.
No. Awesome. That's fun. I haven't heard that twist.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
really big
Yeah.
on relieving myself of decision-making fatigue.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
And if I have a non-essential choice to make,
Hmm.
I will often leave it up to randomness.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'll tell you, it actually does wonders for making decisions about like where you and your girlfriend are going to go for dinner.
Cool. Yes.
Because
Right.
it takes the accountability out of it,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Like if you put Italian, Chinese, Mexican, or Japanese into the wheel, and one of you pushes it, and you're committed to doing whatever it lands on,
Hmm.
there's no "I told you so." Apple Music and Spotify, as much
Uh-huh.
as I lament the fact that they don't pay the royalties that they should, it is awesome that we have as much at our fingertips as we do.
Yeah.
And I love the activity of now spinning this wheel every night.
Hmm.
and commit to listening to an album front to back.
Yeah.
And then I have a rating system.
Hey, cool.
I give it 1 to 6 points. One is I turned it off and didn't make it through. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool
That's
to look
cool.
back at it and see where I'm at now. Having checked out a lot of music that I would have never checked out. But like, that's what we should do.
Yeah, right.
We have all this at our disposal now, at our fingertips. Someone in the 1950s, their mind would be blown that you have virtually every piece of commercial music ever released in an app on your phone at a moment's notice. And they would want us to take advantage of that. And I should take advantage of that.
Yes. And I also think that there's a responsibility and kind of a burden of, you have all of these tools. What are you going to do with it? Like, if I gave all of these tools to a lot of people in history, they'd be a lot better. And they're already better than I am. So it's like, how do I like make up or do something different or do something me, but like step up to
no
that.
Excuse.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, I can listen to anything in the world. Why aren't you? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I've got one last question for you and I'll let you go.
Yeah.
This show is called Love Music More. This little segment's called Love Music Why? And I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Why do you love music?
I don't think I'll ever fall out of love with music.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm firstly a fan. Listening to Good Vibrations brings me as much excitement today as it did when I was 6.
Yeah.
And as much as I've committed my life since then to making music, I don't feel any closer to making something like Good Vibrations.
Cool. Yes.
And that doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying.
Yeah. So Russ, where can people hear more of your music? Where can they connect with you?
Connect with me on Instagram. Shoot me a message on my website. Come see X Ambassadors. I put out a little jazz record a couple years ago. Go check that out. Just under my name.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.